Hello and welcome to the deltaDNA webinar series. My name is Isaac. I'm head of insight here at deltaDNA. And this afternoon we're going to talk about our new segmentation tool. So here we are on our new manage segments page, and let's jump right in to creating a segment. As always, we are in our DeltaCrunch demo game, which you all have access to in your account. So you can, during this webinar or afterwards, you can click along and do all this stuff yourself in your own accounts. So this is our new segment builder interface. So the nice thing that we've been able to add into this is a little bit more responsiveness about what the metrics are that you can use and what they mean and what values they take and that kind of stuff. The other really cool thing we've done in the last release was to have some category tags which you can manage and assign to the different metrics so that you have some track of which metrics go where. Because one thing we realized is that while it's great to have loads and loads of metrics and it lets you do lots of cool stuff, it can be a bit overwhelming when you first come into the tool that there's sort of like 200 metrics here, and you may not know what any of them do or what they refer to. The category tag system I'll take us through a little bit later, but you can see here on the left that there's now a series of categories you can use, like acquisition or demographic or device or engage, event, so on and so forth. These are our default categories that will be assigned to all of the default events. And then you can, as I said, we'll go through the tool later, but there is a way where you can reassign these or create your own tags or add those to your own events and manage it all yourself. But there is a default there if you don't want to get your hands dirty with that straight away. So once you click on a particular category, so let's say acquisition, so here we have our acquisition channels, the basic kind of data for our demo game, and then when you want to build a segment, of course, you take your metric and you apply an operator, and then you say what value you want. So you want it to be equal to that value or not equal to that value, or for these strings, they can start with or contain certain numbers of characters. But let's just stick with equal to for now, and you can see the cool thing is that when we set this up, it's now showing us a table here which breaks down all the possible values that has. So here are all our different acquisition channels, and for all the players in our metrics database, here is the breakdown across those. So this is the snapshot view of your players across this metric. So it gives you an idea straight away of what you're going to select. So if I wanted to pick, so let's just pick AAA ads as our acquisition channel, we can immediately put that into the equal part of the segment builder, and it'll tell us what percentage of players that is. So we know it's 14,526 users because that's in the table here, but that is now telling us that that's 2.65% of the entire population, which is a useful thing to know when you're building segments, because you want to know if your segment is going to have lots of players in it or have no players in it, so on and so forth. So that's what happens if you choose a categorical or a string variable like acquisition channel. If you pick a different numerical variable, like let's say total days played, instead of getting a table in this value panel, we'll get a histogram. So here we have our histogram of total days played for all the players in our metrics database. So just to kind of take a step back for 1 second, so when I talk about the metrics database, I'm talking about the single snapshot view of every single player that's played your game. So we have a table in our database which contains one entry per player, and in that row it has every single metric value calculated up to yesterday. And that's what this segment builder works against. This is not necessarily when you use these segments in anger, say in engage and other parts of the tool, they may not pick up exactly these players, but this is a guide of if you were to have these segments applied last night when the metrics are updated, then these would be the players that you would select. So it gives you a guide to what the distribution of the metrics look like at a given recent point in time for your game. So here is the distribution total days played. So most people are at 0 because obviously we have a lot of churn. You can manipulate the chart builder in a lot of different ways. You can change the number of bins, so you can have between 10, 50, and 100 bins in your histogram. If you click on that, it will recalculate and replot it. You can also plot a logarithmic chart for something like days played. That actually makes a lot of sense because more increasingly high values are much, much less likely. And so you can see the distribution more clearly if you use a logarithmic plot. The other cool thing that happens when you build segments is that, so if I start to say, okay, let's use greater than, so let's see how many players are greater than, have total days played are greater than 2. We hit enter, and we'll rechart this again. This blue bar is showing us what part of the distribution is selected by this criteria. And if we had to change that to less than, you can see that now it's just that tiny sliver at 2. And if I change this to say 20, of course, then it starts to become a bit more obvious what's going on here. So then, and if I go back to greater than, so its blue section is a visual guide to show you how, what part of the distribution you're selecting by applying these criteria. And again, we can see the total number of users and the percentage of users selected by this. So in the Delta Crunch game, only 2.4% of players managed to get to 28 total days played, which is 13,199 users out of the total population of players who have ever played the game. Okay, cool. So that's the kind of criteria builder. Of course, the other part of building segments is chaining these together. So let's build a kind of interesting example to show how you might build out a full segment using these tools. So let's for the sake of argument, say we want to build out a segment of people that we're going to show ads to. I know deltaDNA ads are a big deal for us these days, and we've just launched our self-service smart ads ability. So there may be many of you out there just now preparing to build the first segments of players that you might want to show ads to. So let's call this our advertising list or advertising segment, or just advertising. Right, so let's say that a typical setup for advertising might be that you don't want to show ads to payers, so you only want to show ads to non-payers, and maybe you don't want to show ads to brand new players. So I want to only show ads to players who are non-payers, or it's non-payers and they have played more than a day. So we've got our total days played here. So let's say we want our total days played to be greater than 1. Okay. And then if we click done, that will then collapse that large block into this simple description of what the criteria are. If you want to get that back, you click on the arrow, and that will just bring open that box again. But let's close that guy for now. So we want to have, for our advertising segment, we want to have our total days played greater than 1, and we click the and button to add another criteria, and we want to make sure that they're non-payers. So non-payers are transactions, will be real currency amount, total real currency spent is equal to 0. And again, if I click here, it will show me how many players have meet this criteria. So the key thing to keep in mind is that these boxes are only interested in the criteria you're building inside of them. So here we're saying that 96.3% of people match this criteria, but it's not interested in this top one yet. If I want to see what these things do together, so let's just click done on that just for now. So now we've got our 2 simple criteria for our advertising. We're going to wait 1 day after install, and we're going to make sure they're not a spender. So if we then click evaluate, what that's going to do is tell us exactly how many players that catches. And you can see that at the top here, it's telling us that this segment will catch 306,000 348 players, which is 55.93% of our total player base of this many players. So you can see that this is a much smaller number than, say, the two together, or the two separately, sorry. So 59% of people match this criteria, and 99% of people, or 96% of people match this criteria, but when you put them together, it ends up being a slightly smaller number. But this is quite handy because this then, particularly in this case, it's telling us, okay, where our selection or our segment is only 50% or 56% of our player base. So only 50% of our player base will see ads. If we wanted to show more ads or less ads, we would adjust this number. But at least now we have a good guide for how many people are in each segment. And you can imagine from all segments this is important because you may well not want to have some massive campaign that only hits 2% of players, or maybe you don't want to make very generous offers to 90% of your players, or things like that. So this is quite useful in that we never really had a very easy way you could assess this before. Now it's right here and you can do it very easily. So you can build much more complicated segments than this. So let's kind of make our advertising segment a little bit more complicated. So let's say that we want to use different strategies in different countries for whatever reason. So let's pretend that in Australia we want to wait a little bit longer to see if people are going to spend. I don't know why you would do this. Maybe you're spending a lot of money on acquisition in a particular country and you don't want to jeopardize that by showing them ads. Maybe there's different versions of the game in different places. You can imagine lots of different scenarios. So let's just, for the sake of argument, let's just imagine a simple scenario where we're going to have a different strategy in a different countries. So let's keep this is our base advertising selection where we have greater than 1 day and non-spenders. Let's add a criteria this to say something demographic. So let's say that the user country is, this is only going to apply to people if they're not in Australia. So let's chuck AU into here. Click done. So now this will apply if people are not in Australia. Now, of course, what this means is because these are ands, if any of these criteria are not satisfied, then people won't fall into this segment. So at the moment, we're not showing any ads to any Australians at all. So what we need to do now is to have an OR in here. So we need to have a separate set of criteria for our Australians. So let's add the Australians into this one just to make sure they're caught by it. There we go. And then we can add our other criteria. So of course we want them to be non-spenders still, so we'll put our non-spenders back in here. And maybe we want to wait 3 days for Australians. So let's have our, not that one, player. Total days played is greater than 3. Okay, and now we've got our 2 blocks. So most players that are not in Australia will be caught by this one, but then if they are in Australia, they'll be caught by the slightly different set of rules, which will then mean that they're not seeing ads until they've been playing for more than 3 days. So then we can evaluate this guy. So our old one was 59 or 55.93. This is 55.2. So there's not enough Australians in the game to for this to have a big difference. But of course, when we do see them, they will get a different criteria applied to them. So there's our slightly more complicated advertising segment, and you can imagine that you can build this out to be as complicated as you like. There's no restrictions on how many ands or ors you can have in these different blocks, and of course there's potentially hundreds of metrics you can use, so this can be as suitably complicated as you need it to be. And that's really the power of the deltaDNA system, is that you can make very, very complicated segments that you can then use around the tools to get exactly what behaviors you would like. So we'll just jump quickly away from this segmentation bit, and I'll take you through how the tag system works now. So I was talking to you before about how these categories appear now that you can allocate certain metrics to certain categories. So if we just jump out of Analyze now and back into Setup, you can see at the bottom of the Setup, there's now a new section called Categorization Tags. I hope I saved that. I'll just quickly double check that I saved my advertising. I didn't save it. That was a bit silly. Okay, I'll just quickly recreate my advertising segment. Okay, and it was players who have played more than a day, and then non-spenders. Save buttons are important. Okay, and we won't worry about the extra complexity. So there's our advertising segment saved again. Let's have a look at the new categorization tags page. So this is a very simple interface where you can add as many tags as you like. They are just tags. You can edit the ones which are already there. These are, as I said, these are the defaults that we've enabled in each account, but you're well within your rights to edit these as much as you want. And you could add these standard events. And then you can just save it by hitting the save button, and then of course we could add another one which is custom events, and we can add anything we like. Let's just, for the purposes of this example, let's add a new tag called power-ups. Obviously Delta Crunch is a match-3 game that has power-ups, so let's, rather than just call them items, let's call them power-ups because it's an important part of how Delta Crunch works. And you can see that this list just expands and contracts as you add the tags. You can delete any tag that you like with this red X. These are just string tags, so there's nothing more complicated to be done on the screen than just having a list of the tags that you can use. Now, where you can start to use tags are in the events and in the game parameters. So if we go into view events, we can see our event list here. If we grab an event, let's say mission started. Right, so here in the description of the event schema, you can see there's now a categorization tags panel, which was never there before. So that's a new feature of this tag system where you can tag events with whatever category you like. And so here we can see even though this is one of the interesting things, this is one of the only things you can adjust in the live system for events. So normally events have to be modified in dev and then pushed to live, but of course these are just tags which float around inside the platform, so you were within your rights to change them at any time. Now you can see we've got gameplay assigned to this mission started event. You can actually have as many tags as you like on an event, so it makes sense to have the missions. This is probably a standard event, let's say. We can do whatever we like, and then you can save that. Okay, I was wrong. You can't save them here. Okay, we have to save them in dev. Which I don't have permission to do. Okay, well, anyway, if you're in dev, you could save these tags against the events. Now, it's not just events that have tags, it's also game parameters. So any of these parameters, of course, you can see these parameters in the events here, but to modify the parameters, we need to move into the parameters page. So if we go over to the manage parameters page, here we can see our long list of game parameters, and of course this is where you given the ability to create metrics in the first place, right? So you can see, we see here in our acquisition channel parameter that this is, the metrics, the allocation of metrics to this parameter is done here. And so it makes sense that we would then also have the categorization tags in here as well. And similarly to the last example, you can come in here and you can add tags to game parameters which then, if they're metrics, will then be categorized automatically for you in the segmentation interface. So we made our power up category tag. So let's grab our power up name, which is down in this long list of parameters. And then at the moment it's just an item, but let's make it a power up as well, and then we can save that. Okay, and then that game parameter is now saved, and of course we've got this as a metric already. For people that haven't seen this before, these are, the game parameters are basically the fields that get sent on the events. And so there's two ways that you will see these game parameters. You'll either, if you're implementing the events into the game, you'll see these as the parameters which are tracked in the game and can built into the events that are sent to us. And then of course on the platform side, when you're looking at the data, these parameters are the things which make up the columns of the events table, which you can inspect through Slice and Dice or data mining or places like that. So, but this is the place where you can get information about them or turn them into metrics. Many of them will be metrics by standard, but of course, an important task in the beginning of implementing a game is deciding which of these different parameters you would like to track as a metric, because not all of them will be tracked as standard. The management of the game parameters is an important part of getting the game integrated with deltaDNA effectively. And so understanding in your game what these parameters are doing could make your life a lot easier in terms of using the platform. But so we added our one tag onto our power up name. So let's just go back and see how that's impacted our segment. So now we added a few new tags. So let's go and create a new segment and see how that's worked. So you can see we had we modified these ones to then sort of change their nature a bit. So the standard events now has that guy in it. The power up one has the power up name in it as we wanted from our edits to the parameters page. And so you can see that you can really quickly set up this list to look the way that you want to make the segments behave, much easier for you to manage. So when you're creating new segments, you can very quickly find the metrics that you want. And the intention is that we're going to roll this categorization system out across the platform. Whenever you see metrics or events or fields, this will be here to give you a guide as to what the meaning of these different things is, make it a bit easier and a bit more manageable. So that's the tag system. So finally, one thing I want to do is just sort of quickly show you how you can use segments. So we'll go back to the Manage Segments page. So of course here is our long list of all segments. There's a lot of kind of test and demonstration segments on the demo game. One feature which wasn't added in the release but it's made more prominent is this compare feature. So you can grab up to 5 segments to compare and check their overlap. So what that means is, say we can grab our advertising segment we just made. Perhaps we'll grab our Australian segment. I don't know, let's take spenders, say. And then we can, if we compare, it will give us a little table which tells us how many players are in each and what percentage of the selected segments these make up and what percentage of what players are and so on and so forth. And then it has a little diagram which tries to demonstrate how these different segments overlap, which can be quite useful if you're going to have some combined segments for messaging campaigns or advertising campaigns or anything. So you don't have to go into the segments themselves to get the number of players or the percentages and those kind of things. You can just select them like this simply and hit the compare button, and then it'll tell you this number of players that are in that segment as of today. Cool, so that's the compare part. I'll just quickly show you how you can use the segments in the system. So you can simply use the segments in any, basically, of the Analyze and Engage tools. In Measure, you can add a segment to the to the measure filtering by clicking on the segment filter bar and then adding the segment name. So if we update that guy, make these a bit less restrictive. Maybe that's okay. So that's a quite restrictive filtering, but yeah, you can see that this is just pulling out the guys that are in the advertising segment. You can use the segments we can use them in any of these pages in the same way. Obviously this filter setup is the same on any of the measure tools. In Analyze, you can use them in Slice and Dice and Funnels. I'll just quickly show you. I won't do very complicated examples, but here you can see the segment selection in the filter bar for Slice and Dice by default, and you can see here's the full list of segments again, so we can pull the advertising segment out and we can chuck him in there. Funnels is the same, so Funnels has a very, very similar filter bar to the measure, and so here's our filters again, and we can put our advertising segment into the funnels, and it will only consider players that are in that segment for the funnel. And then in, say, data mining, you could actually open the segment SQL. So here at the top, you can see there's a segment tab, which will then allow you to open the SQL, which defines the segment. And then by default, it runs a query which gives you the count, which will be the same as the numbers that have appeared on the other pages. But then, of course, you could make a more complicated segment selection here in SQL to test how many players are slightly different from this selection, or combine it with event data to build more complicated analysis. But you can use a segment as a starting point. So that's how you use the segments in the Analyze tools. The really interesting thing, of course, is how do you use them in Engage? And I chose advertising as an example because that's an area where you want to use a segment in our Engage tool to do something, which in this case is to show ads. So I'll just quickly jump here into Engage in the end of this webinar just to show you how you might use the segment in here. So just to quickly show you how Engage works. So now we have added a Smart Ads action to our other types of actions in Engage. So here, this is now the ability to show an ad at a particular part of the game. I think I've created an action down here which is called ads. So I'll just quickly jump out of that. Obviously today's webinar is not about Smart Ads. But I'll just quickly show you that because that was released today. So if you were to want to use a segment in a campaign, and here we're talking about an ad campaign or the ability to show ads in games, you create a new campaign. This is going to be for advertising. You can use any decision point that you like. So we say you want to show an ad at the start of each mission. We can use our mission starter decision point. Now here is the key part where the segments start to come in. So in a campaign, of course, you can select a segment. So here we're selecting our advertising segment. And what this means is that, at this decision point, people in this segment will get the thing that happens here, the action which happens here, which in our case, we want to show them an ad. So there's our ad. And actually, it's as simple as that. So what this now is basically saying is that, when you hit the mission to start a decision point, if you're in the advertising segment, then you get the ad action, which is the smart ad action, which tells our Smart Ads SDK to show an ad. Actually, you don't need to do anything else in here. All of the other toggles and stuff in this page is for running more complicated messaging campaigns that are either chained together or have some other complicated logic attached to them. So we don't want the ads to end. We don't want there to be a conversion event. We don't care what happens. We just want the ads to pop up and then people to click on them or to ignore them as they wish. Cool, and then that's it. And then, we click next, and it says here that, obviously we have on the mission starter point, we're going to grab the people in advertising segment, and we're going to show them an ad. And it's really as simple as that. And if I was to start this, then it would start to do that action out into the demo game and populate some statistics on how many people had been hit in that advertising segment. But that is really as simple as it gets, and that's the kind of primary usage for segments. Really, obviously the segments are quite handy around the platform, but really the secret to using segments is in the engage system. And in this kind of simple example I've used, you can see how you could apply some simple rules like waiting a day to show ads or not showing ads to non-spenders and things like that. You can very, very quickly put those kind of segments together in the segment tool. You can also put together much, much more complicated segments, but we don't have time today to go through those kind of more sophisticated setups. And also that starts to be very dependent on what kind of game you have and how you've implemented the data with deltaDNA. Thanks everyone for listening, and hopefully you'll all be in your accounts making some amazing segments later today.
Thanks, Isaac. Bye.
Okay, goodbye everyone.